They said the Oregon Trail was just history, but I found the truth buried in its haunted path, where the dead still walk and the wheel never stops turning. You're listening to ASMR 404 Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're reading this, then maybe you're already one step too far down the wrong trail. Maybe, like me, you thought the Oregon Trail was just some old dusty path with wagon wheels etched into the dirt from centuries past, something romanticized in history, books and school games. But what I experienced out there was not a ghost of the past. It was something still very much alive, something watching from just behind the brush. Something that doesn't forget who walks its pathum. Not a historian or by ghost hunter or any kind of paranormal researcher. I'm just a guy who hikes for solitude. I document trail erosion and historical land shifts for the Oregon Historical Conservation Initiative, basically a glorified solo backpacker with a drone and a topography scanner. And I'd taken this particular job because of a few odd reports coming in from ranchers and solo campers in the stretch near Baker City. Strange lights, old wagon wheel sounds, in the distance missing livestock. More than one guy said he found strange wooden structures in the trees too high for any animal to build, the kind of things that should have collapsed from rot long ago. But didn't he arrive just past early spring, when the ice had melted enough to open up sections of trail that had been closed all winter? I parked near a back access gate well off the beaten path, an unmarked entry known mostly to historians and dedicated thru-hikers. It was a part of the Oregon Trail, so remote that even seasoned hikers avoided it, said the weather turned too quickly out there, and compasses had a way of going haywire that wasn't a joke either. I'd brought 3 backups, GPS wrist compass trail markers, and an old-school paper map with hand-marked coordinates, just in case. The sky was this washed-out, overcast kind of gray, with that eerie stillness that makes even birds shut up for a while. And as I passed into the deeper woods, something felt wrong immediately, like something behind me had stopped breathing. When I stepped forward, I shrugged it off, told myself it was just nerves, or maybe the silence playing tricks on my brain there. This thing that happens when you spend enough time out in nature alone. You begin to feel like you're not the only thing walking, and sometimes maybe you're not. Day one was mostly normal. I logged land depressions where wagon wheels had once passed, measured some soil samples near the rusted remnants of what looked like old tools or cooking gear, and set up camp near an ancient fire ring, just a circle of stones long covered in ash and moss. That night I lit my small burner, made a cup of powdered coffee, and sat under a crooked pine tree watching the horizon, while the wind started shifting harder than it had all day. I noticed something weird right before I turned in my trail markers. The little fabric ones I'd clipped 2 branches behind me were gone. I always put one every few hundred feet. It's habit now from past jobs, but they were just gone, like someone had unclipped them. No wind could have reached where. I left them not under those thick branches. The forest didn't sound right either, I could swear. I heard hoofbeats in the far distance, not heavy like horses, but light, clumsy. Scraping hooves that would trot for a few seconds, then go dead silent. Agunai slept with my knife in my hand the next morning. I woke to find my tent had been moved, not far, maybe 3 or 4 feet to the right, but it wasn't where I'd staked. The pegs were still in the ground, but the canvas had been slid with them. I checked my gear, no animals, nothing stolen, just a strange, musty smell, like damp wood and old sweat lingering in the air, like something had crouched outside my tent. All night breathing. I packed up fast and pushed deeper into the trail, hoping to reach an old trade post ruin. By mid-afternoon, that was supposed to be my main mapping target for this section. I kept feeling eyes on me the whole hike, and I mean that. Literal ice on the back of your spine, breath on your neck kind of is around. Noon, I found what looked like a small circle of bones, laid out in a perfect ring on the trail, thin bones, like deer or maybe something smaller, cleaned of all flesh to clean like they'd been boiled. There were small pieces of dried leather and broken glass in the dirt around it, like an offering or ritual, but no markings, no fire, just a bone, circle and silence, so thick my own breathing sounded like a roar. Then I saw the carving. It was faint, buried behind some lichen on a tree trunk, maybe 7 feet up, too high for a person, unless they climbed, but it wasn't carved with a knife, more like scraped out with something dull. The shape was a wagon with a single eye where the wheel should have been. I should have turned back right then. I kept going like an idiot because the drone was still in my pack and I hadn't finished my scan, and maybe a small part of me didn't believe what I was seeing. Maybe it buys hunger or the altitude messing with my judgment, but I told myself it was just some backwoods hiker playing pranks by evening. I found the post station, or what was left of it, 3 collapsed wooden structures, partially buried under overgrowth. And one of them still had a stone foundation, with rusted nails scattered in the dirt like teeth. I set up camp on the opposite side, near a dry creek bed far enough away that I could pretend the ruins weren't watching me. That night I heard footsteps. They came round 3 in the morning. Not boots, not shoes, not paws. They were the dragging kind, the slow, shuffling, heavy-legged kind. And I swear on my life, they circled the camp at least twice. I held my breath and didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just gripped my knife and listened. At one point, the shuffling stopped right outside the tent. Then I heard this low whistling tune, like something trying to hum through a throat filled with dirt. It wasn't a song I recognized, but it made my bones lock up like they'd turned to iron. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 hours. It stopped suddenly, like someone clamping their hand over a mouth. When I finally stepped outside at dawn, I found more bone circles, this time 3 of them, not just laid on the trail, but around my camp, like some kind of warning. The bones weren't just animal anymore. There were human ones, to a few finger bones, teeth, and something that looked too much like a jaw fragment. I snapped a photo with shaking hands and tried to radio out. No signal. GPS, frozen on the screen, still said I was half a mile west of my actual position. I tried rebooting it, and it wouldn't respond. like it had locked into some dead place that didn't want to be mapped. I hiked fast that day, faster than I should have, with all my gear still heavy on my back. I just wanted out, but the trail didn't want me to leave the forest. Changed. I passed the same dead tree 3 times, even though I never doubled back. The bark was stripped in the exact same pattern each time, like claw marks slashing downward in a fan shape, like something had dug into the trunk, trying to escape from inside it. Around late afternoon, I found an old journal half buried in the mud near a rock that looked almost carved, but not with hands. I opened it, and the pages were soaked and stuck together, except one that had been folded and tucked into the spine, like someone wanted me to see it. It said, "Thee don't die, they just wait. The wheel turns. Don't walk where the sun doesn't reach." That night I didn't sleep. The whistling came back, but this time it was inside the tent. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, with my back pressed to the far wall of the tent, holding the blade so tight my knuckles felt like they'd crack open. The sound of that breathless whistling echoing around me wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside the nylon, inside the seams, inside the fabric space that had no room for anyone. But May didn't move, not even when I felt the air change the way it gets when something walks into a room you thought was empty. There was a shift in the weight of the space, like someone had ducked in low through the tent flap without unzipping it, like it had just passed through. That I heard Ita whisper that wasn't shaped right, like it was crawling up from under layers of dirt. No one leaves. The wheel turns, they ride still. I burst out of the tent with everything in me, screaming, even though no sound came out of my throat. My lungs locked up like the forest air was trying to choke me. The bones were gone, all of them, even the ones I'd found by the trail earlier. They were just gone, like they'd sunk into the dirt or been pulled back under by something that didn't want me to show them to anyone. My tent flap was still zipped shut, but I hadn't zipped it. Packed up as fast as I could. No food, no rest. I just needed to move, to find high ground and signal out before whatever was walking with me decided I didn't need to leave. By mid-morning, the trail was unfamiliar. I'd followed my map exactly, retracing my steps to the gate I'd come through, but it wasn't there. Nothing looked the same. Worse yet, there were old wagon ruts in the trail now, ones that hadn't been there when I passed through the first time. They were shallow but clear to narrow depressions in the dirt, like something had recently dragged wooden wheels through the same stretch that shouldn't have been possible. The last wagon on this part of the trail had passed through over 100 years ago. Then came the crows, silent crows, dozens of them perched along the higher branches, staring down at me with that wrong kind of stillness animals get when they've seen something they can't make sense of. Their heads cocked just a little too far, bodies too stiff, like they'd been placed there, like they'd been told to watch. I walked faster every step, feeling like it echoed too loud, like I was alerting something I couldn't see, something I didn't want to meet. By late afternoon, I found what looked like a campfire, but it was fresh still, warm, with no one around. A metal cup sitting beside it, with steam curling from the top and the smell of coffee in the air, but not the kind I drink. This was older. It smelled like burnt chicory, like the kind they used to brew during the wagon die-out. Didn't touch it, not because I was scared, because I knew it wasn't for May. Backed away and kept moving, trying not to turn around, even though I felt something behind me. Again, not footsteps this time, but the sound of wooden creaking, like old wheels, turning slowly in grass, the smell of ash and tanned leather, filling the air like a fire from a time before Match's eye. Past an old signpost, half sunk in the dirt, the wood worn but still legible Fort Wilkins, 14 miles but. Fort Wilkins was nowhere near this part of Oregon. It wasn't even in the same state it was in Michigan. That's when I realized something had shifted. Wasn't just lost. I wasn't in the same forest anymore. Not exactly. The trees were older, the air was thicker like syrup, and the trail ahead was straight and wide and lined with rotting canvas tents that fluttered in wind. I couldn't feel they looked like emigrant tents, but torn open and sagging, like something had crawled through them from the inside eye past one, and looked in against every instinct, screaming at me not to inside. Was a chair with leather straps bolted to the arms and dark stains on the floor around it next. To it was a child's wooden toy, wagonand. It moved just a little, just enough to let me. No, I wasn't alone in there, ran then. I don't even remember for how long. I just remember passing more signs that made no sense. Chimney Rock, 30 miles, Fort Laramie, 12 miles. Independence, 6 miles side, fallen into the trail, somehow, not just a path. Up it, not just walking it. I was inside its memory, or maybe its nightmare, and it didn't want to let me go. The fog rolled in so thick I couldn't see my own hands anymore, and that's when the voices started. Not human voices. Voices like broken things, trying to speak through dry throats. They left us. We walked so far, we never stopped. We never got to rest. I screamed back, not knowing why, not caring what herd made. Didn't leave you. I didn't take anything. I don't belong. Here the fog swallowed my words, and something moved in it, fast, low-dragging chains, or bones, or something worse. Then I saw her. She was standing just off the trail, in the fog, not dressed like a pioneer, not even dressed like a person, more like she'd been assembled from pieces that didn't match. Her skin was stretched thin like wax, and her eyes weren't eyes, just hollow spaces where black ran like wet tar down her cheeks. She didn't speak. She just raised one hand and pointed behind me, and I made the mistake of looking behind me. Were wagons real ones, dozens of them, all rotting but moving, empty but creaking like they were filled with weight that didn't belong to this world. Walking alongside them were figures not fully formed, just impressions of people, clothes, bime, bones, and stretched skin without faces. They were all coming up the trail slowly, like they'd been walking forever. Ran off trail into the woods, heart punching through my ribs, lungs burning, legs screaming, and every step I took the ground felt less like dirt and more like fabric, something stretching under me, something thin that could tear finally. I collapsed near a ridge and didn't move for hours, maybe longer. The forest was quiet again, not safe. Quiet, just waiting quiet. When I awoke, up it was night again, and the moon was wrong. Not full, not crescent, just too big and too low, like it was watching from the wrong side of the sky. Pulled out my last flare and lit it just to feel like I could push the dark back. The red glow lit up the trees, and for a second I thought I was alone then. I saw the wheel carved into every single trunk over and over, the wagon wheel with the eye in the center, hundreds of them manned beneath them, names scratched deep into the bark knot, with tools, with fingernails or something worrisome of the names I recognized from the old Ledger's families, who'd vanished on the trail in the 1800 others, were names I didn't know, but one was mine spelled, right carved, fresh with red sap still leaking round. That's when I dropped the flare, and that's when I heard the wagon pull up behind Minnow. Horses, just wheels grinding stone en route, and that same whistled tune drifting through the trees like someone trying to remember the melody from a funeral, long forgotten. The wagon stopped just behind me, but I didn't turn around. Not at first. Something deep in me knew. Better, like how a deer knows not to move when the shadow passes overhead, or how a child knows not to speak when the closet creaks open the ground. Around me was cold and wet, but not like dew or rain. It felt like it had been soaked in something heavier, like something had bled into the earth over and over again, for longer than time remembered, and my boots were sinking into it. Stood and faced the wagon slowly, not because I was ready, but because I knew if I didn't, whatever was inside would come to me. Instead, it wasn't like any wagon I'd ever seen in the museum or in the trail books. It was tall, too tall, with wooden sides that bowed, bright like ribs, and cloth draped over it that moved on its own like lungs, breathing beneath the canvas. The wheels weren't wood, they were bone, long splintered pieces curved into imperfect circles bound together with sinew and rusted iron and wear. The hitch should have been where oxen or horses once pulled it. There was nothing, just air that moved like something invisible was still straining forward, dragging the weight of the dead bend. Then the cloth lifted, just enough for me to see what waited inside. Not a person, not a goose day. Face that wasn't a face anymore. Stretched skin over wooden slats. A mouth where the seams split open sideways. Teeth made of broken nails and old wagon pegs. And eyes that blinked without lids, staring deep. Like it could read every mile I'd ever walked. It didn't speak with a voice, it spoke with memories mine. Saw my childhood dog's eyes roll back as it died in my arms. I saw my mother's hand falling limp when I was too slow to grab her. I saw every face I'd passed on the trail, even ones I didn't remember. And behind it all the endless turn of the wheel over mud and rock and bone-grinding history into hunger. The wagon didn't want MIT, wanted to make me want to stay. That's what it did. It didn't kill you, it made you walk forever. The figures I saw before, they were real, but not dead. They'd been walking the trail for years, maybe centuries, eyes gone, memories stripped, but still moving because the wheel didn't stop once. You were on it, you became part of it. Ran. Again, no direction, no trail, no compass. Just a way, but the forest shifted with me, trees bent, Where they hadn't before, roots grabbed at my ankles, brush that had been soft, now scraped like thorns carved. With old names I screamed until my throat bled, and still the whistling followed like breath on my neck, like footsteps that didn't need ground. Finally, I fell into what I thought was a ravine. But when I hit the bottom, it was soft, not dirt soft, but fabric soft like a tent floor or canvas or flesh. The smell hit me next. Stove, sweat, leather, blood, and the iron temps of something that had rotted and come back and rotted. Again I was inside one of the wagons, not the ghost one. This was older, real, but not rotting like it should have been. It was preserved, and the walls were covered in scratches, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Names, dates, tally marks, symbols of wheels drawn over and over, and in the center, carved so deep, the wood flaked. Reed was a single phrase. I walked and walked and walked. Ty crawled out through a slit in the canvas that hadn't been there when I fell in. And the air outside wasn't the forest anymore, it was dust and heat, and the sound of people crying. I was on the trail, the real trail, not now, not even the haunted stretch. I was back somehow. People around me, sunburned, broken eyes, wide with hunger, were walking beside old wagons pulled by nothing. Just moving forward with nothing inside them, guiding, no map, no stars, just motion. I passed one, and the man looked at me, his lips torn from dryness, his tongue cracked and black, and he whispered something that will never leave me. Help me remember who I was. I screamed again, but nothing came out. My voice was gone. My throat dry like ash, and the dust poured into my mouth and eyes until I felt like I'd become part of the trail itself. Started to walk, and for a long time I didn't stop. I forgot how long I walked, maybe hours, maybe weeks, maybe longer, until something cold touched my shoulder, and I was back in the forest, back under the crooked pine where my journey began. Except I wasn't really back, because everything was older. Now my gear was rusted, the tent shredded, and the tree bark was black, like it had burned in a fire long ago. Carved into the trunk was my name again, but this time followed by a date future, Wu Nai. Don't know how I got out. I don't know who or what let me go, or if I ever really left. All I know is that I keep hearing the wagon wheels in my sleep, and the sound of that whistling tune that doesn't belong to any song, but somehow still plays when I walk too far off trail, when the sun dips behind the clouds, and the wind dies, and the birds stop singing. Chief. Never gone back, but sometimes when I drive past Baker City late at night, see dust in the rear view, mirror, and hear footsteps that don't match my own, and I know the trail never ends, just waits for the next name. The thing about trailheads is they always feel like a beginning, but some of them were never meant to be opened, not by us, not by anyone. The hidden one I found deep in Crater Lake National Park doesn't appear on any official park map. It isn't labeled online, and you won't find it marked on visitor brochures or trail signs. Locals don't talk about it, and rangers pretend it doesn't exist, but it's real, carved into a sloped rock face behind an overgrown clearing at the base of a dead lava flow where the ground feels wrong under your boots. I found it by accident 2 weeks ago. during a routine solo patrol for rockfall hazards. A late September sweep before the first heavy snow hits. I should have logged the location and kept walking, but the air around that clearing felt different. It wasn't just colder, it was watching. I've hiked almost every inch of crater lake in my 11 years with the Park Service, and nothing has ever felt like that clearing. Not the cliffs, not the caldera, not even the cold hush of winter under a full moon. The forest opened up with a strange kind of symmetry. Trees bending back like they were pulled away from something in the middle. A patch of bare rock half swallowed in pine needles. An ash with a strange wooden sign nailed to a stump so rotted it bent under its own weight. It didn't say the name of the trail or the elevation or anything else normal, just 3 carved words, burned deep into the wood with something sharp. Rim access. The lettering was too clean, too deep, too wrong there. No marked South Rim. Trailanly, the main access roads, and the rim drive that circles the lake. But this wasn't just some forgotten service path. The trailhead led straight into a downward slope, narrow and unnatural, with hand-shaped stones set like steps and brush cleared, just wide enough for a single person to walk through without touching anything. I knew right away this wasn't part of the park's official system. No blazes, no trail flags, no maintenance signs, just the faint smell of moss and mineral. I stood there for a long time, unsure if I should call it in, but my feet kept moving like they didn't care what my mind was saying. I stepped past the sign and down the path, and everything went quiet. No birds, no wind, no trees creaking, just my own boots crunching on packed earth, and the faint sound of something else beneath it all, like water dripping through stone from a place I couldn't see, yet the trail narrowed, pinned to a kind of natural hallway lined with old volcanic rock. But the shape was too even, too intentional, like someone had carved it out by hand over generations. Symbols began to appear on the stone walls, not painted, not scratched, but etched with pressure. Clean lines straight to be natural spirals and eye shapes, and hands with too many fingers always pointing down, always guiding deeper. After about a quarter mile, the trail opened into a basin, perfectly circular, perfect. A rock floor was split in the center with a massive fissure no wider than a doorway, and carved into the stone around it were steps leading down into black. That where the tunnel was not a cave, not a lava tube, a tunnel hand cut deep into the mountain, and too smooth, too clean, too fresh, looking for something that shouldn't exist. I crouched near the opening and felt cold air rising from it, but not just cold, it was breathing, like something deep inside was exhaling slowly with rhythm. I should have turned back. I should have reported the trailhead and flagged it off. I should have done what every instinct in my body was screaming, but I didn't, because there was something else in the air. A sound, a whisper, not words, not exactly just syllables forming shapes in the silence, like a song you hear in your sleep and don't remember until it's too late. I stepped into the tunnel and the darkness swallowed me whole. The first thing I noticed was that the walls weren't wet, but they glistened like skin under sweat, and the further I went, the more the tunnel narrowed. Not enough to trap me, but just enough to make me feel like I didn't belong, like I had squeezed into something that wasn't made for people. The smell got worse the deeper I moved. It wasn't rot, not mildew, not mold. It was the smell of old blood, long dried iron and stone soaked together through time. The kind of scent that doesn't sit on the nose but curls up in the back of your throat and nests there. The tunnel never curved, it just went down and down with hand-cut steps that never changed width or angle. Like they were measured by something obsessed with precision, something that never got tired. I stopped to check my GPS, but the screen was black dead, not just frozen or glitching, completely gone, even though I had checked it 10 minutes earlier and it was nearly full battery. I tapped it, shook it, tried to reboot it, but nothing responded. The headlamp flickered once and came back, but the second it did, I saw something on the wall, a head day, carving deeper than the others. It wasn't a symbol, it was a face, but not a human one. Elongated skull, wide eye sockets, no mouth, and the eyes were carved open, not closed. No pupils, just black oval pits that seemed to drink lighters. I stepped closer. I noticed the wall beneath the face wasn't solid, it was cracked like something behind it had been pushing, and the stone was still warm. Might moved past it fast, trying not to breathe too hard, but the air got heavier with every step, like I was sinking underwater, and something was pressing on my chest from all sides. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber-wide circular deep, with a ceiling so high my headlamp couldn't reach it, and at the center was a stone platform, and it lay a skeleton, not human, too long, too narrow bones curved like they'd grown under pressure, and the skull was split in two, as if it had been opened from the inside. Stone floor around it was covered in carvings, too many to make sense of symbols and shapes that moved when I blinked. Hands, circle spines, faces, sand, a phrase written over and over in a spiral down into the platform itself. Deep must not risk it. Deep must not rise it. Deep must not rise. I turned round. The tunnel was gone. Behind me was only smooth walnut. Crack, no entry, no exit, just stone. That was the first moment I felt real fear. The kind that hits before your mind catches up, the kind that burns the tips of your fingers and makes your vision go white. Then the sound came back, that whisper, but this time it was words. They walked too deep. They heard it sing. They woke the root. I wasn't alone. I looked back at the skeleton, and it was gone. The platform was empty, but there were wet footprints leading away from it, across the floor toward the wall to my left. I followed them because I had no choice, because the air behind me was colder now, and I knew if I stayed still, something would crawl up from underneath and take me. The wall opened before I touched it, just peeled apart like fabric, and beyond it was another tunnel. This one was wider and not stone. It was something else. The walls were lined with tree roots, but they weren't dead. They pulsed like veins, and the ground was soft, not dirt, not sand, but skin, not human. Skin thicker, smoother, hairless, but warm. The lights flickered again, and when they came back, I saw that the roots weren't growing into the tunnel. They were growing out of something beneath it, something huge, something sleeping, still. kept moving because the tunnel curved now, and I thought maybe, just maybe, it would lead back to the surface. Maybe this was some kind of geothermal vent system or ancient growth network. Something explainable, something real. Then I saw the faces, not carved, not drawn, real faces, grown into the root walls, stretched like parchment eyelids, fused lips, sewn eyes, twitching behind the skin. Hundreds of them, some old, some recent. One of them looked like a ranger I used to work with, who'd gone missing 4 years ago. The tunnel breathed it, exhaled hot air that smelled like memory, and I started to cry without realizing it, because the sound I heard next wasn't from outside my body. It was from inside. Day, voice in my headnet. All who walk return, not all who see survive. You were invited. You heard the song, and then I remembered the dream 3 nights before I found the trailhead. Day, dream of standing on a cliff overlooking Crater Lake at night, with the stars gone and something rising from the center of the lake, something black and thin and singing without sound. I had heard the song before, and I had followed E.T. Ronnie didn't care what direction, I didn't care what the walls were made of. I just ran, and the tunnel began to change. The roots turned into bones, into beams, into rusted metal, until I was in a corridor made of something mechanical, low, but humming a low vibration. Underfoot, like a turbine spinning in another dimension. I found a door, metal and round like a voltanet, were claw marks deep and desperate, and a phrase carved in something too wood, jagged to be humando. Not let it follow. I opened 8 and stepped into water, not deep, just enough to cover the soles of my boots, but it was warm, and it moved like it had a current. I was back in stone now, and other chamber, and in the center was a whole wide pulsing something breathing up through it, and around the rim were bones, not stacked, not scattered, arranged like a pattern, like worship. I don't remember falling, only remember the sound, like a chorus of voices screaming into my ears from inside my own skull, and the Frasio are the path now. I woke up in the dark, but not the kind of dark that surrounds you, the kind that feels sewn into your skin. There was pressure on my chest at first. I thought it was a cave-in. Maybe the ceiling collapsed, but when I moved my arms, I realized the pressure wasn't weight. It was a feeling like something holding me down from the inside out. I wasn't lying on stone anymore. It was soft beneath me, warm and moving, like breathing. The air smelled like sap and copper. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body trembling, and I saw that I was in a chamber I had never seen before. It wasn't carved by tools or hands. It was grown. The walls were flesh-like, the color of dried leaves stretched over pulsing veins, and the floor was slick and glossy like mucus or resin that had hardened under heat. I was in the heart of something, not metaphorically, not in fear, not in I was inside something. It had grown beneath the lake, beneath the trail, beneath every step people had taken over the last century, and none of us knew we were walking on its backets. Breathing slowed as I moved toward the far wall, where I saw a pit. Looked like a doorway, but it shifted like smoke as I approached it, and when I stepped through the world Twisted Eye was no longer underground Eye, was standing on the rim of Crater Lake again. It wasn't the lake I knew. The water was black and completely still, like a mirror turned to obsidian, and the sky above it was colorless. Not night, not day, just gray. There were no stars, On the center of the lake was an island that hadn't been there before. It pulsed it breath. I stepped toward the edge and realized I wasn't standing on dirt. The rim was made of faces, all of them open-mouthed, silent, screaming eyes, wide frozen in expressions of terror, and they were all looking at me as if waiting. Something shifted beneath the water. Spray ripple moved outward from the center of the lake, slow but wide, as if something massive had just turned over beneath the surface. Then the whisper returned, but louder, 1,000 voices whispering the same word over and over. Remember. I did not just the dream. I remembered being here before, not in this life, but another version of me standing on this same rim, watching something rise from the waterway root, not a tree root, but a mind root, something ancient, something sentient that had spread beneath the land, feeding on fear, memory, silence, and I had helped it once before. I had opened the door. I had followed the song. This was not the first time I screamed, but no sound came out. The lake answered for me. Pulse of pressure rolled over the rim like a tidal wave without water, and I was thrown backward into nothing. I landed back in the tunnel. The real tunnel lore, maybe another version. Bitey could hear footsteps now, not mine. Something was coming, not running, not dragging, just walking, slow, deliberate. Heavy Eye Ronnie didn't care. Where the tunnel twisted, the walls blinked, the carvings reached for me, and behind me I heard breathing. Not human, deeper, wetter something. Bet had lungs the size of houses, something that had waited too long to stretch its limbs. Saw light ahead, a crack of daylight trail. Sunlight, I dove for ether. Tunnel narrowed one last time, and I crawled through on hands and knees, feeling the walls pulse around me like a throat preparing to swallow. Then I was out the forest floor, the south rim. Trailhead covered in mud, blood, sap gasping for air that felt too thin. The sun was high, and the sound of wind through trees never felt so loud. I didn't speak about what I sigh, didn't report the Tanali, tried to forget. The dreams came back every night. The Rimtha Lake, the Rootha, faces, and the phrase that still echoes inside my skull every time I close my ICU are the path. Now that was 3 months ago. Yesterday I went back to the park to visit the new ranger on duty. He told me they closed the Cleetwood Cove Trail again, another sinkhole. He said, but something odd happened. This time they sent in a geological crew to assess the damage. Only 2 men went down the shaft. Only 1 came back. He hasn't spoken since. He just sits in the ranger station, staring at the lake through the glass window and whispering something under his breath. I leaned close when no one was looking. I heard it remembering. No, now the tunnels never let go. They grow beneath us, patient, waiting. Every step we take near Crater Lake feeds them. You think this story is just horror, but it's a warning. if you ever find yourself near the south rim trailhead, and you feel the ground shift beneath you, or hear a whisper with no voice, don't follow it and listen and descend, because once you hear the song you are already beneath, and the deep never forgets its own.